Raiding, large-scale encounters, and instances with intricate mechanics and phase-based game design has long been a popular staple in PvE titles, giving the players an opportunity to rally round a task or an encounter that requires cooperation on a level that is elevated above the foundation the game usually requires is an extremely exciting and rewarding experience to play. Taking this into account and the fact that Helldivers 2 already centers around teamwork as a primary way to get things done, it makes complete sense to me that were there enough interest from both the player base and the developers that this would be an excellent addition to how we can play Helldivers 2. Curious about this idea, I polled my community recently asking them what styles of content people would like to see added in the future to Helldivers 2. Shout out to all of you, by the way, who took the time to vote and even comment there. And the results clearly indicated that larger encounters with mechanics and phases were definitely something of keen interest to the community. The question is though, how would this look in Helldivers 2? Well, I think that borrowing elements from other games that work these mechanics in well would be a beneficial starting point. The three that spring to mind for me instantly are Destiny 2, World of Warcraft, and Deep Rock Galactic. The sci-fi setting and the first-person perspective that Destiny 2 leverages have offered notoriously exciting raid encounters throughout its time, and have managed to incorporate the use of firearms to a superb standard in said setting. I have the same feeling here when considering the gunplay in Helldivers 2. World of Warcraft is also renowned for its PvE content, and its raiding mechanics have created some truly memorable gaming moments, not only from the gameplay standpoint but also in terms of lore. Raiding Icecrown Citadel and Wrath of the Lich King brought the story arc of Arthas to a dramatic conclusion.
Frostmourne hungers.
And I think this is where Helldivers can leverage this idea of raids to work in tandem with the galactic war we are fighting. Perhaps raid instances could be part of the galactic war. This would be 6-man squad runs that require some more considered thought on squad roles and the way loadouts would function due to the inclusion of boss mechanics and different styles of challenge that each section would throw at a team. Once weapons have had a balanced pass, armor values are working as intended, and we see some additional stratagems added to the game, I think this could really open up the opportunity for players to niche into more specialized loadouts. Heavy armor, the medic passive, slugger shotgun, flamethrower, and guard dog or shield, you've got yourself an excellent frontline tank that can lead the charge. Reintroduce the angel support drained from Helldivers 1 and combine this with horde clearing setups, and you've got yourself a healer of sorts to support your squad. Leaning into this, boss fights could then be constructed to include mechanics that require the squad to respond in certain ways at given moments during an encounter. For example, there may be a moment where a huge wave of enemies rushes the players as a boss charges up an attack that can do horrendously high AoE damage to all party members. To prevent this, an EMS strike needs to be called in on the boss, and the squad need to ensure that the person who is carrying this stratagem is given the space to do so. Or perhaps there is a moment where one player has a debuff placed on them and they are aggressively rushed by a wave of enemies and will kill them without protection. This is much akin to ad clearing in raid encounters in an MMO. What if a certain boss can only be damaged by certain types of stratagem or damage type? Maybe you can only damage using the rail cannon, and you have to complete a sequence of events in a fight to reveal a weak spot that can only be damaged by this specific stratagem. You could also apply this notion to types of damage. Maybe bosses can only be damaged in a certain window by fire types. Possibilities here are truly endless, folks. What about having to move to designated positions at certain moments to either avoid huge AoEs or interact with a button or console to prevent something happening? The list goes on. What are your thoughts here, folks? Sound off in the comments below. One particular raid instance idea that I've had is centered around the notion that we need to hit an automaton homeworld, as Intel has suggested they are developing a super weapon at a huge open air facility. The mission would require us to drop on the planet like usual, push through objectives that we're accustomed to, but perhaps the last one in this section will be a stealth-orientated objective to gain access to a massive automaton facility, akin to something you might see in the Destiny franchise but on a much larger scale. Once inside, you would need to progress through difficult mission objectives, which would be comprised of standard mission requirements, mini-bosses, significant events that require interaction with mechanics, and will be punctuated with some larger boss fights that include phases and require specific approaches. In this particular raid, the final boss will be the super weapon we've been sent to destroy, destroy, some sort of supermassive amalgamation of all the automatons we've come across. Think Tank, Hulk, Devastator, Berserker, Liquid Terminator from the films type vibes. If we look at how Deep Rock Galactic handles events and mini-bosses, I think we could borrow from there too. One area that really stands out to me when playing Deep Rock Galactic is the Corlock Tyrant Weed encounters that you have as a random event. These have a low spawn chance in DRG, but can become an absolutely massive hurdle that you often need to overcome, especially when it's in the way of completing an important objective. This quote exemplifies how I feel some encounters in Helldivers 2 could be developed. The Corlock Tyrant Weed itself does not attack dwarves directly, only being able to attack through the use of sprouts surrounding it. Tyrant Weed is immune to all damage, but can be made temporarily vulnerable by killing a specific amount of sprouts, which causes the boss to open and reveal its heart. While the Tyrant Weed is opened up, it becomes vulnerable to damage for a short time. Shooting the Tyrant Weed's heart is the only way to deal damage to the boss. Whenever the Tyrant Weed opens up and becomes vulnerable, it will also spawn more Corlock sprouts to replace the ones the dwarves killed. Boss's health is split into 3 health bars. However, whenever the boss loses its first health bar, it will begin spawning healing pods whenever it opens. So, taking this type of mechanic-based approach and obviously getting maybe a little bit more creative with it would really open up some excellent opportunities for the developers to create another avenue of content for us to engage with as a community. Speaking of engaging with the community, if you could please take a moment to drop the channel a subscribe and like the video, it really helps me out. Thank you. I've also seen requests for content that centers around multiple fire teams of 8 to 12 players working towards a common goal. It also reminds me of fighting world bosses a little bit in Guild Wars 2. Could we maybe be split into 2 or 3 squads of 4 and then complete our own sequences of missions before being brought together for a larger massive boss fight, dropping onto a larger map that contained a more intricate set of mission objectives akin to what we've just discussed earlier? The really exciting thing here is, folks, is that we're having this conversation and the community members are feeling that enthused about the game, making these kinds of suggestions. We've got an absolute banger of a game on our hands here, folks. If you're looking for a deep dive into some more stratagem mechanics, check out this next video on sentries. It's got you covered. Take care of yourselves, keep having fun, and I'll see you in the next one.